In yesterday's World Exclusive with the Russian Foreign Minister, he had announced the second phase of this special operation in Ukraine. Now, that has widely been interpreted as an intensification of military operations, especially in the eastern part of Ukraine. And I want to show you precisely where that's actually happening. Just take a look at this updated map. We're actually updating this map practically every few hours. This is what it really looks like right now. The entire red portion you see here is all area that is under Russian control. The places that are striped are places where fighting is happening. Crimea, of course, was annexed in 2014 itself. The rest of Ukraine is pretty much clear. The blue areas you see here are areas that were controlled by Russia earlier, but have been taken back because Russia has withdrawn and Ukraine has established control, especially in the Kyiv and Chernihiv area. Remember, India Today is reporting from all of these cities, including over here where no other reporters from any other channel have been deployed. We're in this entire area. That's where that's the Black Sea. That's where the Russian cruiser Moskva was sunk last week. But this entire red stretch is going to be the focus area for what the Russian foreign minister called the second phase of operations in Ukraine. It's likely to intensify in this area now. And here's a look at what has been happening in the city of Kharkiv. Mosmi, who you just saw reporting, is the first and only Indian reporter from the city of Kharkiv, which at this point is one of the most devastated urban centers of Ukraine. Here's what she sent us.
This is a marketplace that was bombarded, a missile fired right here. And here you can see how the debris is being shuffled out. The entire house was blown up. A commercial building was blown apart. A bridge behind me is what you see is actually sinking in because it's damaged very badly. And these are the images that we see in Kharkiv. Remember that Kharkiv is the second largest city. It is of great strategic importance to Russia because it gives access to the southern and eastern stretches of Ukraine. And that's why a tooth and nail battle is being fought.
More than 480 kilometers in the east of Kyiv is Kharkiv. The city is 300 kilometers away from Donetsk in the Donbas region. Kharkiv is right in the middle.
Flagship Moskva.
The Russian foreign minister on 19th April, in an exclusive interview to India Today, clearly mentioned that an eastern assault is now their focus.
This operation in the east of Ukraine is aimed, as was announced from the very beginning, to fully liberate the Donetsk and Lugansk republics. And this operation will continue. It is beginning, another stage of this operation is beginning, and I'm sure this will be a very important moment of this entire special operation.
Russia has no intention to return captured territories like Kharkiv. This has put a question mark on the future of the people of Kharkiv who are caught in this battle.
We are in one of the shelter homes for the aged, and this is for the elderly people. You can see this is Albina, whose house was demolished. She was stuck in the basement for weeks and then shifted to a subway, which was a bomb shelter. But for weeks she was without clothes and had no help. And thereafter she was brought here to this shelter home, which has become like a blessing. I'm showing you, this is Yugan right here, who's 82, and this is Misha. Misha is 72, and Misha and Yugan are another set of refugees who've come from in and around the Kharkiv area that is being bombed continuously.
The war in Ukraine has reached 56 days. In the last 2 months, Russia has reduced the second largest city of Ukraine into rubble. From Kharkiv in Ukraine with Mosmi Singh and video journalist Parminder Sharma, Bureau Report, India Today.
With Kyiv relatively calm now, India Today's reporters, as you can see, have been deployed in all the parts of Ukraine where the actual fighting is taking place. You saw that report from Kharkiv. Now watch India Today's Abhishek Bhalla reporting from the Trostianets city, another urban center that's been under attack. Take a look.
This is the main council building of Trostianets, from where the mayor's office functions. And this entire building was in the occupation of Russian forces for more than 3 weeks. In fact, this is the place that had turned into a battlefield. A pitched battle was fought here, and there are telltale signs of bloodshed here. You know, clear signs that there was a lot of fighting here. And there are claims by Ukrainian authorities that a senior Russian military officer, a general, was in fact killed in this very room. More evidence and signs, you know, these are the camouflage jackets worn by the Russian soldiers, very clearly showing their presence here. Another, army clothing that can be seen here as well. And Lalit is finding it difficult as he moves because, you know, there is a lot of muck lying around. That's the situation that we are seeing on the ground. This place is only 35 kilometers from the Russian border. There are some places close to the border that are still seeing fresh attacks. So there are fears, there is still anxiety that, you know, the Russians might come back. But for the time being, the situation seems to be stable. That's what officials say here. With camera person Lalit Joshi, this is Abhishek Bhalla from the Sumy region for India Today. The governor of Sumy Oblast, which is the Sumy region close to the Russian border in Ukraine, is joining us for a chat, Mr. Dmytro Zhivitsky, and we will speak to him and get to find out what exactly is the situation around this area. There's still some fresh attacks happening, we believe, and although things are stable in the town, but at least closer to the borders, there is still a lot of tension. Thank you for speaking to us. Can you tell us what the situation right now is in your region?
Thank you. The situation is stable and under control. After the Russians escaped Sumy region, we began to rebuild and renovate infrastructure and hospitals.
So what kind of damage was caused because of the invasion? For how long were Russian forces in occupation of places here? And what was the, destruction to not just infrastructure but also to life? Can you give us an insight into that?
Russian occupation forces were here for almost 2 months. 20,000 tanks, armored personal vehicles, self-propelled howitzers were there. They left almost 1,000 buildings destroyed.
And what about deaths of people?
More than 120 civilian deaths, which also included children. And every day we find more bodies in fields and forests.
So you've been hearing what the second phase of operations in Ukraine is going to look like on the back of the Russian foreign minister announcing that in that big world exclusive interview that he gave to India Today yesterday. But what does it really mean? He wasn't very forthcoming, but we've decoded what the second phase of this war could actually mean. Let's just take you through what we interpret it as. First, Russia's complete focus has shifted to the Donbas region. That's the first, perhaps the most obvious part of it. Moscow trying to encircle the eastern part of Ukraine is the second, and like I showed you in that map, that has pretty much also happened. The battle for Donbas, that is the eastern part, Luhansk, Donetsk, is likely to get bigger and bloodier. There are airstrikes already happening in the Mariupol area. That city is likely to fall. Moscow will try to retain the cities it has captured. It is in no mood to give away territory it is in control of now. And it has also signaled that through that interview by the foreign minister. So Rajesh Pawar is on the ground. He's a combat veteran. He's been reporting for India Today for the last many weeks right now. Rajesh, could you give us your view on what you think Sergei Lavrov meant when he said the second phase of operations? Generally, the sense is it's going to be an intensification of operations in the eastern part of Ukraine. What are you hearing?
Look, Shiv, I think the second phase of operations for Russia would mean, firstly, the consolidation of all the areas, cities, and villages which they have occupied in east and southeast of Ukraine. Secondly, what we are hearing is the Russian strategy now is to encircle the Ukrainian forces which have moved towards east to fight Russian forces. It is something like put a fortress behind them, put a gap between the Ukrainian main headquarters and these forces. And Zelensky said there are 40 to 50,000 troops, the best men and equipment Ukrainian army has right now, which have moved towards east to fight in Donbass. And Russia plans to encircle them and then annihilate them. That seems to be the Russian strategy as of now, which has been brought forward by American intelligence and Ukrainian intelligence. Besides this, we are hearing that now MiG-29s might be provided to Ukrainian defense forces to operate against Russians. Also, there are new equipment which Biden has announced that include 155mm howitzers and other modern weapons, including air defense equipment. So we are going to witness a very, very intense battle in coming days, both from Russian and Ukrainian sides. Shiv.
Stay safe. Thanks very much for getting us that report. You're right. The MiG-29 fighter jet spares and aviation equipment has arrived in Ukraine. We'll have to see, what kind of role this will play in an already pretty robust defense that Ukraine has put up so far. Thanks very much, Rajesh, for getting us the latest on that. The number one hit on Putin's war machine couldn't be more exemplified than by the sinking last week of Russia's Black Sea flagship, the Moskva cruiser. It's a story that's still reverberating all around the world. It has raised Ukrainian defense forces to the realm of legend, and it has made them look like a smaller force that is truly giving sleepless nights to Putin's war machine. Take a look at the first big strike by Ukraine. An unthinkable image for every Russian. A sight that will sink millions of Russian hearts. Just days after Russia's Black Sea Fleet flagship sank, the first image has emerged of the stricken vessel of war. Once an icon of Russian pride, seen in these final moments last week, listing dangerously to one side after either being hit by Ukrainian missiles or a devastating explosion on board. Let's try and decode this first dramatic image of the stricken 13,000-ton guided missile Russian cruiser. The most obvious is the smoke billowing out of the superstructure, clear signs of fires still blazing below deck. Also notice how the ship is listing dangerously to one side, confirming structural damage from the explosions. If the Moskva was indeed hit by a pair of Ukrainian Neptune missiles, then they appear to have smashed into the ship in this frontal area, just behind where the ship's own P-1000 Vulcan anti-ship missile launchers are located. Notice these gaping holes in the hull of the ship? Some of the strongest evidence that a missile strike is likely what doomed the Moskva. These appear to be impact points for the incoming Ukrainian sea-skimming missiles. There is also clear smoke damage in the rear end or the aft of the ship, suggesting that this photograph was taken after a much larger fire consumed the vessel. The picture of the doomed Moskva has clearly been taken from another Russian vessel, one of many that converged for rescue operations.
While this new image of the damaged Moskva answers many questions about where the ship was hit and where was the damage caused, several questions still remain unanswered.
While this new image of the damaged Moskva answers many questions about where the ship was hit and the kind of damage that was caused, several unanswered questions remain, questions that will hopefully be answered in the days ahead. For instance, how did just 2 anti-ship missiles sink this huge ship? Why is there total silence on the condition of the 510 crew who were reportedly evacuated? Did the Ukrainian missiles cause a fire detonating ammunition on board? If the fire was accidental as Russia claims, why is Russia talking of retaliation? And finally, why are families of the crew on board so conspicuously unheard and unseen? With the Moskva, Russia has lost more than just any military platform. It has lost a piece of its legacy and military heritage. With Mosmi Singh in Dnipro, Ukraine, Bureau Report, India Today. And one of the most defining images representative of the Ukrainian fight back has been an endless litany of destroyed Russian tanks. In many cities, in many suburbs of Ukraine, this is the most common sight: shattered, blown up Russian armor. What does it actually represent beyond the fact that the Ukrainians have been fighting back? Take a look at this report. Perhaps the most sustained, defining image from the Ukrainian combat zone has been endless convoys of destroyed Russian tanks. Mangled metal corpses, their turrets blown off, their guns pointing aimlessly and uselessly to the side, bombed to oblivion by Ukrainian drones and anti-tank missiles. The armor of Putin's invading ground forces, a terrifying testament to Ukraine's dogged defense. India Today's reporters have been up close with these veritable tank graveyards.
Now this is a burnt Russian tank, remains of a burnt Russian tank. The V sign, as you see on the barrel in front, is a clear indication, as Russian tanks use two signs. They either use a V or a Z or a Z. The tank completely shattered and destroyed. It's the gun and the turret, they just lie some distance away, buried in sand, an indication of the kind of impact that took place. And this tank is completely charred, burnt. What Ukrainian army personnel tell us that this was targeted using a Javelin anti-tank guided missile.
The Russian armored columns and mechanized forces had hoped to mount a brutally enforced siege of Ukraine's cities. It was through the barrel of these machines that Putin had hoped to quickly impose his will. The tanks and their backup forces have done untold damage in Ukraine, it's true. That is without doubt. But the tank commanders themselves had not accounted for just how well equipped the Ukrainians would be. Armed with NATO-supplied Javelin shoulder-fired missiles, Russian tanks have lived through a nightmare in Ukraine so far. What Russia had hoped would be an unchallenged rumble through the highways of Ukraine has resulted in massive combat losses to Russia's armored forces. According to the latest Ukrainian claims, well over 800 Russian tanks have been destroyed so far and counting.
This is a destroyed tank, and this is again has been destroyed by a top attack. If you see, the tracks are intact, the tracks of the tank are intact. There is no impact from the side, but the top has been destroyed, and that is a turret. Turret has gone and fallen there of this tank. So this has been probably attacked by a Javelin missile, or by a TB2 missile, or by a drone, which generally attacks from top, which is the softest part of the tank.
2 months into the war, as Russia concentrates its forces in the eastern parts of Ukraine, the condition of Russian armor is very different there. In the east, Russian tanks have established total control, but remain vulnerable to Ukrainian attacks here as well.
I'm atop a T-64 Russian tank, and they are now preparing to roll in to the border areas, the front line. The preparation is on. The weapons are being placed, ammunition being placed inside the tank. They were taking a break, but now they're preparing themselves to go to where we're coming from. The last village that now is under Russian control.
Russia's tank fleet is obviously much larger than the forces deployed in Ukraine. So theoretically, there's more where this came from. But with armored losses notching up to the claimed 1,000 mark and counting, Ukraine could perhaps say that Putin's invasion has tanked. But the war is far from over, and there's much more damage expected ahead. Now, you've just heard how the Pentagon has revealed that Ukraine has begun receiving some aviation consignments to boost the capabilities of its existing air force. But even without that, the Ukrainian air defense forces have put up a formidable fight to Russia's superior air power, with tens of fighter aircraft shot down in the last 2 months. The numbers are staggering. It's what Ukraine claims, but they've made deadly use of NATO anti-aircraft weapons right through this invasion. Take a look. Another defining image of the Ukraine war has been Ukraine's spirited defense of its airspace. With NATO refusing to impose a no-fly zone to keep Putin's air force out, Ukraine has had to fight Russian fighter aircraft using ground-based weapon systems. And the results for Ukraine have been far from bad. Image after image since the beginning of the war has seen Ukraine claim big hits on Russian Air Force combat aircraft. Like this Russian Sukhoi Su-35 air superiority fighter that was shot down using NATO weaponry, the pilot now in Ukrainian captivity. One of several pilots that Ukraine claims to have captured alive. Russia had made a dramatic early declaration after the invasion began that it had paralyzed Ukraine's air defense network. But these images testify to the reality that Ukraine has been able to impose a significant cost on Russia's air power strength. According to the latest Ukrainian claims, over 170 Russian fighter jets have been shot down in less than 2 months of this war. That's more than 8 squadrons worth of frontline combat aircraft, a huge cost by any measure. Using Stinger and Starstreak air defense missile systems supplied by NATO, in addition to legacy anti-aircraft weapons, Ukraine has been able to effectively target and destroy tens of aircraft in the last few weeks of this war. Far from the unchallenged airspace that the Russian Air Force may have been expecting, Ukraine has been able to put up more than the semblance of a fight. The aircraft types shot down by Ukraine include the most visible Russian aircraft in the Ukraine crisis, Sukhoi Su-25s. Tough old Soviet-era birds that have taken on most attack duties in the combat zone of Ukraine. Ukrainian missiles have also brought down several Russian Sukhoi Su-34 supersonic medium-range fighter bombers. But even with all that damage, Russia has a huge air force with many more assets to throw into the combat mix. As borne out by the aerial strikes just this week in the city of Mariupol. And continuing air power missions being launched by frontline Sukhoi Su-35 squadrons, videos of which are regularly published by the Russian Ministry of Defense. Ukrainian pilots haven't been flying many missions. And the country's air force has been trying desperately to get combat jets from NATO, a quest so far unsuccessful. But even without an air battle in the traditional sense, Ukraine has given Putin's pilots a great deal to chew on, both in the air and on the ground. So how is it that Ukraine has been able to put up this very formidable defense? How is it that they've been able to give the far superior Russian armed forces such pause? Well, one of the answers to that question, of course, is the Ukrainian nationalism, its patriotism and spirit. The other, of course, is raw naked weaponry that has flooded the country. Here's a look at the top advanced weapons that Ukraine's using. Their country invaded, hundreds of square kilometers taken over or destroyed. Ukraine is now a hellscape. Only two things have perhaps kept Russia from achieving its military objectives with any swiftness. One, the amazing Ukrainian spirit, the indomitable courage of its people and soldiers. And two, the sudden access to huge consignments of highly advanced weapons and military hardware, courtesy NATO. Fueled by nationalistic fervor against a relentless invading force, Ukraine is better armed than it ever could have dreamed of being. And it is these weapons that are proving to help Ukraine stay on its feet, bleed the aggressor, and keep Russia on the run. Let's list some of the weapons that are widely now regarded to have given Ukraine serious teeth in this ongoing battle. The Javelin is a new generation fire and forget missile that uses automatic infrared guidance that allows the user to seek cover immediately after launch, hugely improving survivability of infantry troops in anti-tank operations. This priceless quality has allowed Ukrainian troops to hit Russian tanks with javelins without revealing their positions. Another anti-tank weapon that's allowing the Ukrainians to give Russian armor sleepless nights is the one you see in this clip, shot from a window in besieged Mariupol. The British-Swedish NLAWs, or Next Generation Light Anti-Tank Weapon. The NLAWs is also in Ukrainian hands in large numbers. It's a fire-and-forget lightweight, shoulder-fired, disposable single-use missile system designed for use by infantry troops. Between these two NATO anti-tank weapons, Putin's giant convoy that had been trying to encircle Kyiv in the weeks gone by is said to have suffered heavy losses, unable to fully meet its objectives before fully withdrawing. The two missiles have also heaped misery on the Russian supply lines attempting to serve frontline armor units. A third NATO anti-tank weapon that's inbound into Ukraine soon is the German Panzerfaust III, a modern semi-disposable recoilless anti-tank weapon. The Panzerfaust III is operated by at least 11 countries and has first seen combat in Afghanistan. This trio of the Javelin, NLAWs and Panzerfaust III makes it clear just how large Ukraine's anti-tank weaponry requirements really are, with NATO regularly feeding that hunger. One of the most talked about Ukrainian weapons in recent days is the R-360 Neptune anti-ship missile. This new weapon system, which entered Ukrainian service just last year, has already allegedly scored the mother of all kills. It was a pair of these missiles fired from the Odessa region in southern Ukraine that is said to have hit and sunk the Russian Navy cruiser Moskva, flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. Ironically, the Neptune is a derivative of Russia's Kh-35 anti-ship missile. The massive kill has elevated the status of the Neptune to the realm of legend. Since the beginning of the war, Ukraine has been awash with lethal Stinger shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles. A weapon that has imposed a huge cost on Russia's air power superiority and will to dominate from the air. More of these missiles are flowing in, empowering Ukrainian air defense units even more. Another weapon being used by Ukrainian anti-aircraft troops now is the Starstreak, the fastest short-range air defense missile system in existence. The man-portable shoulder-fired Starstreak system fires missiles that accelerate to up to 4 times the speed of sound. The Starstreak has a number of advantages over the Stinger and legacy Igla systems currently being used by Ukrainian troops. Most notably, the missile system cannot be jammed by infrared or radar countermeasures. And finally, Turkish TB2 Bayraktar drones, which have been deployed to lethal effect through the entire course of this conflict. Armed with laser-guided smart weapons, the Bayraktar has wreaked havoc on Russian vehicle columns, seriously damaging the Russian supply chain. A pair of Bayraktars buzzing over the Black Sea are also said to have distracted the guided missile cruiser Moskva when it was allegedly attacked by Ukrainian missiles. These hunter-killer drones are said to have been responsible for raining hell on invading forces, destroying large numbers of Russian trucks, infantry vehicles, fuel tankers, and artillery positions, among others. Remember that the supplies of these weapons haven't ended, and Ukraine stands to receive a steady stream of consignments of these advanced pieces of war machinery. As far as Ukraine is concerned, the country couldn't be more armed for whatever's coming next. Well, that's it on this special broadcast. We will continue to be the most watched channel on the world's biggest story, the Ukraine war. Thanks for watching. The news continues on the other side. Stay with India Today.